Good afternoon or good morning if you're in the States, everybody. I'm Nick Marks, the founder and CEO of Friday Pulse. And today we're very pleased to be in conversation with Charlotte Wiseman. And we're going to talk about Blue Monday and how to inject a bit of optimism into this rather dour part of the year. I don't know, I find it quite hard, certainly. So I'm a statistician by trade, so I will be sharing some stats on Blue Monday. But firstly, Charlotte, introduce yourself and what you do in your work.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. And thanks for inviting me to be here. So my name's Charlotte Wiseman. I run a leadership and wellbeing consultancy firm who work with organizations to really help people think, feel and perform at their best. So that is about helping people to engage positively with stress and use it to their advantage, maintain optimism and motivation when stuff's not going well. And it's everything from trainings and webinars to looking at whole organization approaches and more of a kind of subtle interventions that we work with organizations to embed.
Subtle and powerful, I would expect.
Yes, often some of the most powerful. Yes.
So, well, anyway, it's great. We've been looking forward to doing this together, and it's as we know, it's January is not the best time of year for some of us, but also it's a fresh start. It's a start to a new year. So there's opportunities to refresh and rethink what we're doing. So I firstly, Blue Monday is this sort of thing that's appeared over the years as, someone decided that the third Monday in January must be the least happy day of the year, basically, because the assumption is it's a Monday. So, Mondays must be, in the old sort of Boomtown Rats things, I don't like Mondays, there must be that running through. January obviously is one of the shortest months, it's cold, it's grey in Britain anyway. And then also credit card bills hit, the second Monday, they start coming after Christmas. So, what's going on there? And I used to always just totally poo-poo this, but we've actually now got some data on people's experience in the UK on a weekly basis. So I don't know whether many of you have heard of this, but this is YouGov, who are a polling agency, and every week they ask a rolling panel. I think, from what I can understand, it's 2,000 people in the panel. I'm not sure they're asking the same. It's the same people where they ask them every week. I'm not quite sure, but they ask them, how have they felt last week, and amongst other things. And so this is the data from happiness in the UK, right from July 2019. Right through. So it's an interactive thing. So that's why the cursor's moving around there. And what's very interesting is, look here, you can see COVID. This is COVID hitting in March 2020, and absolutely happiness crashing in the UK. And you can also see, the second lockdowns in January of 2021. You can see the effects of that. You can also see Christmases. So this is a Christmas peak from 2019. This is the smaller, lower Christmas peak of 2020, Christmas peak of 22, and then we've just had Christmas here. So you see these peaks around Christmas, which you would expect people to be slightly happier around Christmas, but but you also see these drops in January here. So this is December 2019, and by the time you're sort of this time of year in 2020, pre-COVID, you can see there's been a big drop. Notice it's not really particularly lower than the autumn. So we see this effect after the summer. So here's summer 2020, autumn 2020. Okay, we had more restrictions and lockdowns, so it's more steep, but we see it there. We see it in 2021 as well. This is the summer, this is autumn down to Christmas. And again, we've had it this year. So you can see these drops happening. You can see other things going on, by the way, in the graph. So this is the Ukraine war. So this is the Ukraine war starting here. In February, we see a drop. This is the combination of the Queen dying and Liz Truss's short-term government here in the UK. So you can see that actually the Queen, made quite an effect. And in fact, you can turn on other variables here if you get excited. So you could put sad in there and you'll see a huge spike for the Queen dying. there. You'll see a huge spike with the Ukraine war happening. A little bit of spikes around, when COVID was happening. But actually, sadness doesn't really hold that very well. It's actually one of the reasons why I always measure happiness. So you might think sadness is the opposite, but you could also think of, boredom would be another one. I'll turn off the sadness so you can just see the boredom effects. But you can see people got very bored during the lockdowns, particularly this second lockdown here. But it doesn't quite mirror the happiness. Happiness includes it all. You could also include scared in here. So you can see people were very frightened during the first COVID, frightened during the COVID war, but not particularly with the Queen dying. So there were things going on there. But what I really wanted just to say was, turning off all the other variables, is here's happiness. Yes, it is true that happiness drops in January, particularly from a high of Christmas, where everybody all together in the space of 1 to 2 weeks is having their holidays. In the summer, it's spread out longer, so it's spread out over more things, but it's a peak there. So there is something true in Blue January, bad things. And I don't think particularly Monday. In fact, the data I've seen on happiness at work is that Tuesday is the least happy day of the week. Monday, probably people come in a bit refreshed with a fresh start. Tuesday, it feels a long way away from the weekend, but work is not bad for everybody. It's just that's the whole point of both of our works, isn't it, to improve people's experience of work. But it's kind of interesting to think here, when we have it, we've had a peak and we've gone down. Notice, by the way, the UK is much less happy than it was before COVID. This is really very big effect. Normally, you would expect population means to just trundle along at this line at the same place. So we are much less happy as a nation than we were pre-COVID. Whether this is a mental health build-up, whether it's the stress of COVID, but we definitely is much lower. I know there's lots of other things going on too, the Ukraine war and everything, but it is significantly lower. I wouldn't have expected that in the data. But if we think about Christmas, here's the nice peak before COVID and coming down. What are we missing here? In a sense, loss is a real emotion, and I can turn off the data now because you've got the whole point of it. But loss and sadness. Sadness tends to be evoked by a loss, and most of us, not everybody, has had a nice relational time at Christmas. There's been festivities, there's been feasting, there's been enjoyment, there's been laughter. And, as we come back into January and we go back into our own bubbles, some of that goes. So there's some sort of loss. And some of the things that we might talk about today is how do we include that energetic vitalness of vitality of Christmas in the rest of the year. But that's just a little statistical musing, really, and I like showing that YouGov data. It's one of the reasons why I think measuring happiness weekly is really important, because it brings stories alive so much. Like you can see that huge dip with COVID, you can see the Queen's death or Ukraine happening. Now these are big global things, but in every client I ever work with, there are dips and troughs that are very meaningful to them at a particular level. This is picking up stuff at a national level, so it's much harder there to be bigger events, but there's always things going on. And if you've got weekly data, you can, one, not only retrospectively tell the story, but you can also be right on top of it at the time. So we were going to start, Charlotte, and you had a question to ask everybody, didn't you? But yes.
Well, I've got a few questions I'm going to ask people as we pepper through, but I think it'd be good to start just in the chat function. How are people feeling today? How well, how happy, on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, just to make it easier rather than too much sort of nuances. But how happy is everyone feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high? And as people are popping that in to the chat function, I will share and I don't know, it's not like a peer-reviewed bit of research I've done on this, Nick, but apparently Blue Monday as a concept was first sort of come up with it was a travel company who was trying to combat the post-Christmas slump in people booking holidays. And so it was a PR pitch to try and get more people to book holidays. Was it's the most depressing day of the year, book a holiday and it'll make you happy.
Yeah.
So apparently that is the background. So okay, so generally people are feeling, got 3s up to 8s, 6s, 7s, pretty good, 8. Yeah, it's interesting when we say pretty good, because very often, like, one person's pretty good as a 4 and another person's pretty good as an 8. So this is all, it's all for your own reference. How about if we look forward to the year ahead? How optimistic are you feeling about the year ahead? Let's sort of just subtly change that. How optimistic is everybody feeling? If 1 was low and 10 was high, how optimistic? So I wish I could actually parallel this to see what numbers, is how happy we are now. How does that impact how optimistic we are about next year? Because it does make a difference. It absolutely does make a difference. And it is similar numbers, but I'm going to say a little bit higher, just generally scanning down, maybe a little bit more optimistic about the year ahead. And I'm going to pepper in one more question for you all. If everything in the next year went perfectly, what one thing would be different a year from now? What one thing would be different a year from now? And you're not allowed to say winning the lottery, because it's just boring and everyone always does it. So what one thing, on maybe a little bit of a micro level, what would it be? Would it be you've got a new job? Would it be you've got better balance? Would it be you've run your marathon? This is blue sky thinking. You don't have to be too practical here.
Blue sky thinking on Blue Monday.
Exactly, you get that.
So we don't feel blue. We could go with this quite a lot, couldn't we?
Yeah, we go. What would you, if everything went perfectly for you for the next year, what would be your difference this time in a year? Just one thing that would be different.
Well, I was saying to you before, I'm writing a book at the moment. So I think that the one thing would be if I finished it, I think I'd be lucky to get it published this year, finish it and publish it, possibly, if it goes very well. But I'd love to have the book finished. That would be just brilliant, because it's quite. Have you written the book, Charlotte?
I started actually mid-COVID, and then work. The rest of the business seemed to get very busy, and so we needed to take on quite a lot of team members all at once. So I haven't yet completed the book that was once started, but it's definitely on the list.
Well, it's a priority for me. So I think getting that done, I'm hoping to get a first draft done by end of March. So that's where I'm hoping to get to, and then it's obviously revision.
Amazing.
Turn my intentions to exercise more into a habit. I can repeat that. I have to get a personal trainer in. Otherwise, there's just nothing's happening if she doesn't come in every week. So
yeah, exactly. It's like people find booking classes or whatever. Okay, so there's lots of things. We've got everything from going to Japan to being less stressed. This is something that I think I just see more and more. People get too practical about their dreams too quickly, and we don't allow ourselves enough time for that blue sky thinking, expansive, actually, what do I want? But it can be particularly a time of year where people have set these intentions and they're already starting to go off track, which is another challenge with this time of year. The first 2 weeks we're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym every day, and it drifts quite quickly. So just really important, I think, that we make the time to keep dreaming and keep imagining the best possible outcomes. And that's something very much grounded in the research around best possible self, and some really interesting studies around the importance of actually just imagining everything going really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think we can spend a lot of time being anxious about what's going to go wrong, and as we say, don't lift our heads up enough to think about, okay, what could go right and how can I give it a better chance to do that? And one of the things I'm very interested in about your work, particularly, Charlotte, is the sort of things that you do with clients to sort of help them get unstuck, because all of us get stuck sometimes. We all do. And I think this, as I say, is a particularly sticky time of year, particularly if you're doing what I'm doing, is that we are laying patios outside of a house. So basically it's mud at the moment. It's just, I go outside the back door and I'm in mud, and that is not a pleasure for me at all. But you know, how do we get unstuck from that mud, that metaphorical mud that January can be? And I think you've got this really interesting model. I think you call it hero model, don't you? But you might not want to talk about that straight away. But yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing we do a lot now with teams is we do workshops and trainings around psychological capital, which is a huge body of research around the key things that we need to kind of thrive through challenging times, through difficult times, and maintain that sense of motivation. And it's this hero model, which I can share a handy slide. And it's about thinking of the key factors that really contribute to how do we maintain hope at these times? How do we recognize our own efficacy, which is about it's not as simple as this, but it's as knowing what are the things that make us feel like we are able and we are effectively working and doing and bringing out the best in ourselves. How do we keep a focus on how resilient we all are? Because most of us are quite hard on ourselves and really underestimate our own resilience. And how do we sustain optimism? And optimism is subtly different to hope, because hope is more about having a goal and knowing you've got a path and the agency and you know how you want to get there. Optimism is a little bit more of a global view that, on the whole, good stuff happens rather than bad stuff. So things will turn out for the better.
So actually, that's really interesting, because I'm pathologically optimistic sometimes, you know, in the sense I think my optimism can kind of override the reality of what is going. So you're saying that hope would be more, I've got a plan to get to that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an interesting one, because we do a lot of workshops around that model with teams, with leaders, you know, all sorts of different levels. But I always get challenged, and I always just get told I'm wrong. You know, that's generally the rule, is people just go, no, you're wrong. This is what hope is, and this is what optimism is. And people tend to put them the other way around. Okay. But from a psychological definition perspective, that's how the two are defined. And that is the subtle difference. And there are people who are, as you are, you know, absolutely eternally optimistic. And sometimes people maybe say that they are rose-tinted glasses. Yeah. But you also get people who are pathologically pessimistic.
Yes, totally.
And that doesn't help either. You know, people who are optimistic, they tend to, as a general, tend to be healthier, tend to live longer, tend to be able to motivate themselves through challenging times. So there is a lot of benefit, and you can actually learn to be more optimistic. If you know you are on the tendency of maybe being over optimistic sometimes, there is a lot that you can do to help people be what I call like a healthy level of realism with the optimism. Yeah. But it is really, really important that we identify the importance of actually looking towards those positives. Are my headphones struggling here? I think maybe.
See if we.
No, you actually just froze. Well, it's perfectly good enough. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Fantastic. It's just the thing that we need to make sure we're recognizing. Yeah. And it's not. It's this sort of stuff is really powerful to get people to do in teams. So you actually get people working together. You get leaders working with their teams on cultivating these different elements. And that's really it's really powerful to do. And then you can also embed other ways to cultivate these that across the organization.
So in the chat room, Chris has put going to Japan. So would that would be a hope rather than an optimistic thing. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah. I would say that definitely sounds it. A lot of these sound more hopeful, you know, and that's
Yes.
really, really crucial. Yeah. You know, you know what you've got to do, you know, some of them, you know, running a business more to be more enjoyable. I'm guessing Claire knows what that vaguely would look like. She might need a bit of coaching to identify what are the steps to make that happen.
Yeah.
I'm guessing by the fact that she's put it in there that is absolutely, she knows this is a possibility, and she knows that some things need to change to get there.
Yeah.
Optimism is something that's a little bit more akin to, and again, I'll invite people in the chat to share on this. You know, when something really bad happens, but then it turns out for the better.
Yeah.
People who are optimistic tend to be the kind of people who, I don't know, their flight's cancelled, and they'll go, oh, well, actually, it's even better because I got this done, or I got to chat to someone next to me on the plane, and that was all right. So they can kind of see the potential benefits sometimes of darker times, and I find it particularly interesting because often as a positive psychology researcher, which is where my sort of scientific background is, people assume that everyone from a positive psychology background is just always looking on the bright side and never likes to look at the bad. But actually, it's about acknowledging that sometimes the tough, difficult, challenging stuff is the stuff that teaches us most and helps us to be more resilient and does lead to new opportunities. And I think that's another thing for us all at this time of year, to recognize that it's sometimes our biggest challenges that teach us the most and accelerate towards where we really want to be.
Yeah. And I think you had a question, and maybe it was about the second one of efficacy or resilience, but about what we've overcome. What was your question about that you wanted to ask people? Because I really liked it when we were chatting.
Yeah, well, again, it's into that thing. So what is the biggest challenge people overcame last year? So what is the biggest challenge you overcame, and what have you learnt from that? So what is the biggest challenge you overcame, and what have you learnt from that? So maybe a little bit more thought required.
But it's a good time of year to do that, because it's like, you know, I can remember last January quite well, and a lot of things have improved since then. I actually was having a difficult time last January. Lots of reasons, a building project, which is still why we've got mud outside the back door, and some other things. But you know, it's actually really nice to look back and think, okay, I'm a bit grumpy because I don't like the winter anyway. But it's a lot better than last January, is how I feel, and what we've overcome. So it'd be really nice if people put in the chat there if they've got anything they overcame last year. And you know, we you know, like a lot of people, there were some business challenges, and then there was building a house during COVID was not a sensible idea for stress levels. but yeah, so that sort of idea of a new year being an opportunity to have a fresh start, but also to reflect on what has happened and how we've moved on.
It's definitely something that as in organizations at this time of year, one of the biggest I would say the natural things that happens is people start to set their objectives for the year ahead. And they set big objectives and they set big things, and they don't take time to celebrate the progress from the year behind.
Yes.
And now I'm often engaging with groups and leaders and teams, but I do have the occasional one-to-one moment with people. And the feedback I get is that that's really felt by teams, is actually that they do want leaders to really celebrate those success moments and really acknowledge it. And they do need recognition. And very often, you know, I see leadership teams can be like, well, they know that, well, they got their bonus, it's okay. But actually verbal recognition and regular celebration of milestones is much more powerful. You know, we know from financial bonuses, actually the happiness benefits of that relatively short-lived. It's the verbal ongoing recognition that lasts longer, that touches people a bit more deeply.
It certainly does, and that's, you know, one of the key things that well, it comes out of Teresa Ombili's work, if you know Teresa Ombili's work on the progress principle, but something we built into Friday Pulse was weekly celebrations, because actually, if you progress your work each day, each week, that is actually a really good feeling. And actually, amplifying that feeling by actually sharing it with other people. So one of the features we have in Friday Pulse is that people share a success for the week, and then that goes into a team meeting sort of slide deck that you can see everyone's successes of the week. And that's a really good feature to sort of keep doing those micro successes, because a lot of organizations have employee of the month, which I'm not a big fan of anyway, but other bigger things, like you can give someone a gift voucher if they've done something, but actually it's the micro ones that work just as much. It's the sort of smile, the thank you that's going on there. Yeah. So
we also see that it's like you say, that if there's ones that happen every month, they there's a sense of it being a bit of a treadmill of like, oh, well, it just happens. It's the ad hoc ones that can be really powerful. So it's the CFO calling up one person in the team to say, hey, I've just got the results from your team, thank you, on Tuesday afternoon at a random time of year. It's those kind of moments. So
so we've got a few here. So feeling stuck at work and overcoming by change mindset, and then Belinda's, I'm very sorry about your loss of your sister. It's I remember the first friend of mine dying, and it's just like, it's very shocking when you lose someone who's similar age to you. But we are only here for a short time, making the most of it. I mean, maybe that is, you've learned to come to that, but that is resilience, isn't it? Seeing that, seeing not a positive in it, but a lesson in it, a learning.
It's like amor fati, isn't it? That principle of we should always hold in mind our own mortality. I think that's the essence of that.
I mean, we could get death is one of my favorite subjects, in that I think that, I also do a lot of stuff also on climate and stuff like that, and actually understanding, what sustainability is, and it is understanding we're here a short time, don't use too much resources while we're here, leave it for future generations, but also our own mortality. Like, what do we want to leave? What is it we want to have contributed in our life? I think is a very good question to keep asking ourselves. And improve. I hope, I don't know if I say her name, Sidel, improve fitness. I as I said earlier, I have to have a personal trainer, otherwise nothing happens. But and play what's in front of you with in rugby. That's I've had a building disaster that shows you can problem solve. That's very true. But playing what's in front of you, I think is very important, and trying to, whatever it is, make the best of it is always a good option.
And I think that's there's so many elements. Often people think that the people who are resilient are the ones who are always fine, and it's always okay, and it's always positive. But actually, you only know how resilient you are when you get the disaster to actually check that. And then at that point, usually the insignificant stuff fades away, and you do realize what's important to you and where you've got to focus. So it can be a powerful lesson. And
there's definitely a sort of a time to overcome setbacks. So I'm obviously a data guy, so I see time trends and stuff like that, but we very often see an organization or a team drop, and then how do they come back? And if it's a short setback, they can come back quite quickly, but often it takes quite a time. But resilience can build. I haven't got graphs to show just here, but we've got amazing graphs of clients overcoming setbacks and maybe taking a month to get back into the green after something's gone into the red for them, but absolutely doing that. And of course, I think we've probably all old enough to have been in organizations where they don't ever recover from some bad things, and things get worse. So it's a process. There's a natural process to being resilient. We are naturally resilient, but there's also a lot we can do, I think, to improve the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that principle of resilience not being always flat, it's about the drop and the recovery. That's the resilience, is the pace of that recovery is what we're achieving. So
Yeah, because resilience can be defined, can't it, as ability to absorb a shock so you don't actually ever go down, or the ability to recover from a shock. So I remember someone once explaining it with tennis balls with me about how a ball makes impact with a wall, is it squishes its shape and then it comes back out again. And actually that's part of resilience, isn't it? Sometimes we do that.
Definitely squish a bit out of shape for sure.
We all get knocked out of shape sometime. And I think it's one of the things that, I mean, it's why I don't particularly call myself a positive psychologist now, though I've learned so much from positive psychology, because it does immediately feed into that idea that you're never going to be able to talk about what's not going right. And of course, that's a really important, critical part of it, isn't it? Talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset, and actually, you know, in terms of those celebrating the milestones that you've obviously embedded in Friday Pulse at a team level, actually, I encourage often people to, at the end of every day, you know, actually acknowledge, what have I achieved? What's not gone well today, and what have I learned? And just make sure we're keeping track of those things, because it's those micro habits that help us realize the progress we are making. It's really important.
And habits is a good word, because I mean, obviously with those daily things, there's a lot of work on gratitude diaries or 3 good things. And actually I read this very funny person said, I'm quite convinced we should write an ingratitude diary every day about what we hated today, because at least it gets it out and done with, you know, whereas always it was quite funny, this article they wrote about it. But having said that, I think habits are so important, aren't they? You know, it's yeah.
I think they are, and I think it's important actually that you touch on the gratitude journal concept, because it is one that a lot of people go, oh, I'm going to keep a gratitude journal, but it isn't beneficial for a lot of people. It can be quite detrimental to people's happiness, particularly from different cultural contexts. So it isn't a one size fits all. And for some people, what we call expressive writing, where they do actually take a period of time to get out all their negative emotions on a regular basis, has been shown to be really powerful. Especially if people are holding on to big grudges or regrets. And some quite interesting studies about how it impacts then energy levels as a result, and physical health as a result of just literally getting it off your chest. So there is definitely value in all of that. And I think it is a great time to set habits. I used to be really attached to my New Year's resolutions, and I was one of those people who was like, I'm going to suddenly wake up tomorrow and I'm going to start meditating for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to go for a mindful walk, and then, you know, and it was like overnight on New Year's Eve I was going to change and everything was going to be different. And unsurprisingly, after many years of failing miserably, I became quite skeptical, until I did a bit of research into, you know, is it actually helpful to set new habits at New Year, and what is it that helps us keep them? And it definitely is a good time of year to set new habits. The research indicates it doesn't have to just be New Year. It is important for us to say, I'm going to start that habit on that date. So it could be the 1st of Feb, it could be your birthday, it could be anything, but establishing a start date and working towards that start date is quite powerful. The other thing about setting habits is coming back to your idea earlier, actually, you mentioned sustainable. And rather than setting 12 new habits we're going to do on the beginning of the year, and we're going to change all of these things, actually just change one tiny thing that is almost the easiest habit for us to establish. Just start with that, keep that up for a couple of weeks or a month, and then establish your next habit and keep that up. And that's when they become sustainable habits, not just, you know, the equivalent of a crash diet of like, I'm going to do it all for 2 weeks, then I'm going to crash, and then I'm going to feel rubbish. So for all of these things where people have set goals, what I would really encourage you to do is to say, okay, how can I shrink that down almost into like a minimal viable product? If it is about being less stressed at work, that was one that a couple of people said, what is the one thing that maybe would take you less than 10 to 15 minutes that would start to move you towards being less stressed at work. For me, I know sticking on some really good music for 10 minutes, 15 minutes when I stop to have lunch, even if I work through lunch while I'm making my lunch, some amazing music massively impacts how stressed I am at the end of a day. So really simple, but just start with doing that for 2 weeks. And then do your next habit, and then do your next habit. And I think that's a real key. And that was what the book was going to be. It was going to be basically how to keep New Year's resolutions, but through a 12-month process. And it was going to help people month by month establish a new principle of positive psychology into their daily routine, so that by the end of the year, they had this fantastic new way of viewing and perceiving and engaging with the world around them.
You talked about your book in the past tense. I don't like that. I think
that's the
book
one
will
that's coming next year. Keep that hope, right? Keep that hope. Yeah, that's the book that is coming soon.
So David's got a question for you. Is that event driven? I'm not quite sure what he was precisely talking about. Can you see what he was talking about?
No, that's what I'm trying to think. Is it behavior event driven? Maybe like if you say after this thing, then I will start that behavior. Is that what you're thinking, maybe, David? That rather than picking a date, you could say that event?
So I know that some people like to do habit, I don't know, hopping or whatever, where they attach a habit together, don't they?
Yeah, habit stacking, I think someone's called it.
Well, a friend of mine, he says that he really likes coffee in the morning. So he presses his coffee, but he does 10 press ups while the coffee is brewing. I thought press the coffee and then press ups was quite funny.
Yeah,
but you know, so attaching things to it. And another one's sugar coating things, isn't it? Is like adding something sweet, not literally sugar, that could be, but you know, something you like. Yeah. Yes. Here he goes.
Yeah. So yeah, something's happened and you say, aha, I need to shift something. Absolutely, David. It's really sometimes that is it. What actually got me into my career was a moment like that, where I was in a role where I was working out in Indonesia and had definitely not been looking after myself for an extensive period of time. I wasn't in well-being or leadership. I was in design at the time. And I walked out of the factory at the end of the night, and I literally had a moment where I questioned the meaning of life and whether I was going to keep going. And it was all a rather dark moment, but literally overnight, I was like, right, something really has to change, because I saw quite how sudden something could get quite dark. And I started my sort of first dives the next day. So absolutely, it can sometimes be that moment. It can be something small, it can be something big. But there are moments where our brains are just attuned, and there's a very emotional reaction to something we experience, and that stays with us. So yes, absolutely, it can be driven by a specific event or an anniversary of an event.
Yeah. So sort of in the last 5-10 minutes, and people, please feel free to ask any questions of Charlotte, especially but me as well, if you want to, about her work. But so just going back to that hero model again, so remind us of what the words were, and if there's any other questions you've got for people, maybe put up the slide again. Yes, yeah, hope.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess one thing we've touched a little bit on hope, about what goals you want. We've touched a bit on the challenges you've overcome and that, and we've touched a bit on whether we're optimistic. I would love to hear a bit more on, if we pull into the efficacy element of, what do you think your greatest strength is as you move into the final year? So what is the kind of the strength, the quality that you think is going to get you where you want to go in the year ahead? And that, you know, it can be a number of different things. I don't think I've got, well, I've got some words I could throw up here. Here are some strengths that we could, you know, they might be words on there that you go, that's really what's going to get me through. The word I would have actually said is not on there. The one I said is compassion. That's definitely the thing self-kindness. There you go, exactly, Anne. I sometimes need to give myself a bit of a break. And that's definitely one I know will get me through in the year ahead, and is going to be something I'm prioritizing.
I was thinking for me, in that, I mean, writing a book is like a right pain, because I know the answers already, in a sense. I'm not when you're reading a book, you're sort of looking to learn, and I'm trying to get myself into sort of like, what do I want to communicate and educate? And I sometimes find it like hard in the moment to get to that place, because I'm just looking at these bullet points or words on the screen and thinking, okay, how do I write that? How do I join those bits together? And it's like, I need some trick to help me connect back to where I'm going sometimes. Maybe it is that hope thing. I don't know. Persistence. I'm quite persistent, but yeah.
So it's about when you've got lots of ideas, but joining the dots to actually get it into a articulate.
Yeah, it's like, I know the answers in a way. Of course, I've got to communicate them. It's like, in a sense, I'm not researching something where I'm finding stuff out all the time. And don't worry about this too much. I was just thinking that it's sort of like, it's sometimes hard in the day-to-day grind to look up and see where you're going, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm thinking perspective is your word. That's what I'm thinking about. Maybe, I don't know. It's about saying, okay, well, what does the reader need to know? It's about that element. Yeah. Empathy, self-belief, adaptability. Yeah. Yeah.
Self-belief, that's always important, because like, if you don't believe yourself, who is going to? So
yeah. And this is another thing that, that's really powerful to do with teams. If you're a leader on the call, is actually encourage people to talk about their strengths a bit more, talk about what makes them at their best. There's such an approach to, to so much of how we live life, is we pick people up on their errors. We pick people up on where they need to develop, and we give them quite minute detail. And when we say thank you to someone, or when we appreciate someone, we might appreciate, and we might say, well done, but we don't go into the same level of detail. And it can be really powerful when we're engaging with our teams to say, I'd really like to acknowledge and appreciate your qualities, what you've invested in, and go into a little bit more detail there, as well as doing it for ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I always say about strengths, and people ask me, what's a strength? I say, what is it that gives you energy? That you feel very energized around. So if you were to sort of wrap up, Charlotte, what would be your advice to people about how they can not get stuck and look up, or from blue Monday to blue sky?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of habits that I believe are really kind of powerful across the board. And I think every day, ending your day with a done list. It's something everybody can do. It's really important to stay motivated at this time of year. So end your day with a done list. Try to every day reach out to someone and show some form of kindness. Thank someone, appreciate someone, but actually make the effort to reach out, not with what do I want to get from that, but actually how can I thank and appreciate someone? Really powerful, builds into that sense of community Chris is talking about. And the third thing I would say is, do set yourself some habits, even if you establish some that have gone out the window, but shrink it into the small steps. And I'm certainly going to use this webinar as my re-kick on some of the things that I started for the first 2 weeks of the year and have started to fade off. But just the 10 and the 15-minute habits that you can really keep up, do commit to some of those, because they will be the ones that build up over time and make a real difference.
Yeah. I sometimes talk about rituals and rhythms. I mean, that sounds a bit grandiose, but that actually, I mean, when I was naming the company and we eventually called Friday Pulse, I said, well, the church has got Sunday, we'll have Friday, and it's sort of to reflect each week on how your working week was, so you need to do that on a weekly way. So that's kind of a bit behind it. But the ritual and the rhythm to that, the cadence, is weekly, and weekly is a really good cadence because we tend to work in weekly sprints, but days work well as well. I mean, I like the idea of ending your day with a done list. I actually quite like the idea of your Freudian slip of ending your life with a done list, actually. You did say the end of your life. Oh, well, actually, that's not a bad thing.
Before I stop breathing.
But, you know, to have an aim of what you want to have done in life is good and happy fun. Another thing I sometimes talk about is what economists call commitment devices. I mean, it's a sort of small branch of economics, but things that we commit to limit our choice sets. Because often in the world at the moment, we have too many choices, you know, and actually that doesn't help us. So, you know, so I mean, a commitment of life this is rather brutal, but is a marriage. It's saying basically, I'm going to stay with one person. I'm not going to, you know, look at all the greener grass elsewhere. I'm going to, and actually that commitment to that actually obviously deepens, but it also, you know, God, it makes life a lot easier when you're in a relationship, for me anyway. You know, it's like, but you know, so commitment devices are important. So at work, you know, it could be the commitment device of having a weekly team meeting that you're going to talk about how was last week, you know, and actually committing to that, having in the diary one-to-ones, you know, having them in the diary, you know, committing to them, and then having a process which you commit to actually allows things to emerge out of it, doesn't it? You know, yeah, so
absolutely. Yeah. And that's even when you're building in your day. And a couple of the people I work with who are on doing the 4-day work week, they're very, very specific about exactly that, like building in, I'm committing to this exact thing at this exact time, and really building those in. Yeah.
So those are great. So a done list, do something kind, reach out to someone every day, and commit to your habits, really, your positive habits. Yeah.
Micro habits, one micro habit, that's the key. It's just doing one small thing at a time. Yeah, micro habits, they're the ones that matter.
Actually, that book Atomic Habits you must have read, it's not bad, actually. You know, it's quite American.
It's got some good ones. There's a lot of bringing together of a lot of behavior change research. So I do like it.
Yeah. And I also like the book by, I think she's called Kathy or Katie Milkman, on how to change. Do you know that one? I think that was Angela might be able to pop it in the chat. Yeah, but I like that book. It's a very pragmatic book on creating good habits as well. Yeah.
There's The Willpower Habit is a nice one by Kelly McGonigal.
Oh yes, he's good. Yeah.
And another one is Mindset by Carol Dweck. They're probably two of my, for this time of year, 2 really nice books.
Yeah. So look, does anyone out there have any questions? You know, we've got Charlotte for another 5-10 minutes. If you would like to ask her any questions, or me any questions around anything really now. I mean, we've talked obviously about Blue Monday and the hero model, and now let me get it right. So the hero model is hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. There we go. It's good to have a good mnemonic, actually. I had one for stress, dealing with short-term stress, and it's smoker, which is smokers are really good at dealing with short-term stress. So what you do is you stop what you're doing, you move your body, you go outside, you kickstart conversations, and then you exhale for longer than inhale, which of course is the trick of, you know, mindful breathing, but actually smokers do it naturally, I think. So think smoker, don't actually have a cigarette, but that's the only mnemonic I've come up with which actually sort of works. Most of my other ideas, I've never quite managed to create a mnemonic without destroying the essence of what you're trying to say.
Using random words that don't quite make sense.
Yes, I mean, like, you know, one of the things obviously known for is the 5 ways to well-being, and they're connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give. We tried to make a mnemonic around it, but just sort of ended up mushing it up, you know, so it never quite happened. No. Great. So if anyone's got any questions, please do ask them now. Angela, have you got a poll for the?
I do.
Yes. So Angela sat next to me, my colleague, but this we just really love it if you could just say it's the classic NPS question about whether you'd recommend us, but it's really helpful for us to get feedback on our webinars. So I'd be grateful if you could answer this question. It gives us good feedback on what's gone well and what not. And if you have anything you particularly liked about the webinar, or actually you thought didn't work, then please also put that in the chat or send us an email afterwards. That would be really helpful.
And if anyone's got any questions in retrospect after today, then they can always send them through to me, and Nick can pass those on to me.
Yeah, so we always send a follow-up email. Where are we with Thursday afternoon? It might be Monday now, actually, by the time we got the recording together and everything. But and included that will be Charlotte's email if you've got any questions for her. So yeah. We seem to be done, but thank you everyone for contributing. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, David. Well, we decided to structure it quite. I mean, actually, the hero model was very easy to work around, wasn't it, Charlotte? I really like it. So, and she's very fascinating, I think. So, you know, I really like it when people have got a lot of really grounded experience. So, being a statistician, sometimes I'm a little removed. So it's very nice to speak to people who really go in there and do stuff. Yeah.
Really lovely to chat, and thanks everyone for being so engaged on the chat with us. It makes our job much more fun to be here with you.
Yeah, and I'm not going to scroll back to your hopes for the years, but I hope that they come true, and obviously that Chris gets to Japan, but I can't remember anyone else's. But yeah, that's great. So everyone have a you're going to start an ingratitude diary, Chris. Yeah. I know Chris a bit. That will appeal to her, an ingratitude diary. How did we get in touch? Ray, book title. What was that? David, I haven't quite understood. So I will put any of the books that we put. I'll put them in the bottom of the email to you. I'll get Charlotte to send them me if you wanted any of those recommendations. I'll make sure they go out in the email afterwards. That you've got it. So thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, Charlotte, very much for making the time. And I look forward to us working together in the future, but whatever. So everyone have a good week. We will be doing another webinar. I'm going to do a solo one, actually. I think it's Valentine's Day, but that's coincidental, but somewhere around about the 14th of February, I'm going to do one basically talking about what is happiness and happiness at work. And it's sort of trying out some themes of my book, and I hope I'm communicating them in a way that is really helpful and insightful. Particularly how there's different types of happiness is what I'm going to cover in it. Thank you again, Charlotte. Thank you, Angela. And thank you everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your week and a great year, which we're going to accomplish things, aren't we, Charlotte? We're going to.
We are, absolutely. And we're going to stay optimistic through it.
I'm not going to be optimistic. I'm going to be operationalizing hope, whatever that is, grounding hope and actually doing it, and writing my book. Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Bye.
Thanks,